In my last video, we talked about smooth bow changes. Today, we're talking about smooth string crossings. Hi, I'm Aryadna, and this is Mindful Strings, where I help you learn the violin on your own time and love your every practice. On this channel, I share what I wish I knew when I first started. I put together a free 15-minute Get Better at Violin guide, so go ahead and click that link in the description down below if you'd like to check it out. And if you're ready to shave years off of your learning journey, let's get started. So just as switching bow directions is very important for beautiful music making, knowing how to efficiently switch strings is also an important skill to learn. And a certain amount of control over your bow is required here. If you watched the last video, you should already know that we need a lot of movement and fluidity in our fingers and hand and wrist, a neutral released shoulder, and an elbow that is not locked. When it comes to changing strings, you need to know where to position your arm in terms of height and your elbow, depending on what string you're playing. So for the G string, you want to be here. Again, I'm judging everything by the middle of the bow. So if I'm in the middle of the bow, I want to see a straight line here from the knuckles to the elbow. If I'm switching between D and G, I'm going to be roughly here. Then we have D and A and E and E. So this range of motion you want to get familiar with. So when it comes to switching strings, it's kind of like adding the movement of going up and down to the movement of going side to side. What happens is, if you think about it really in slow motion, is that when I play a note, while I'm still playing that note, I'm going to kind of slowly start to change the angle of the bow so it gets closer to the string that I'm going to, so that by the time I'm ready to play that note and switch bow directions, I'm already very close to the note. So, in other words, if you are playing separate bows, this is a requirement. However, of course, if you slur, it's a little bit easier. It's kind of the same process, but I find it a little bit easier. So you can start practicing with that first. I always tell my students that it's very important not to get stuck in the middle of the bow or in the upper half just because it's easier to play there. However, if you are practicing and learning completely on your own using online resources, I do recommend you start in the middle just because I think you will be able to get a sense of what it's supposed to feel and look like a little bit easier, and then you can just make sure that you expand and do work on the frog area and the bottom half of the bow. So that's what we'll do. We'll start in the middle. Let's go ahead and start with the D string. Just gauge how that feels to try and play one string. Watch the bow hair so that it switches. And basically how far you have to go and how much you have to adjust the angle of your forearm. So I'm going to mostly keep my elbow in place here. Again, I'm positioning my elbow height based on these two strings. So middle of the bow, my arm / hand / wrist are all aligned in a straight line. So that gives me my elbow height. And from there, I'm going to be using the forearm and the wrist and a little bit of the fingers to smooth out the movement. To play the lower strings, to switch to lower strings rather, your wrist has to go down and your hand has to go up. And to switch to higher strings, you have to drop your hand and have the wrist go up. So the higher sounding strings are actually positioned lower, while the lower sounding strings are positioned higher. So if I'm practicing on separate bows, that's what it would look like. And now if you do it the other direction, where it's an up bow, you may notice that that's a little bit harder. So it's almost always easier to play down bow on the lower strings and up bow on the higher strings. So if I'm switching quickly, you can see that it's kind of like my hand is drawing circles. I'm using my forearm very little here. So if I'm going down bow on the D and up bow on the A, it's like the circle is going clockwise. And if I'm going up bow on the A, if I'm going down bow on the A and up bow on the D, the circle is now reversed. When you take this to slower notes where you have to use more bow, you could see that I am following through with my mermaid underwater hand, as well as now adding a little bit more dimension by changing the angles for the strings. So we talked about the right hand as it pertains to switching strings. Now let's talk about the left hand. One main thing to know about seamlessly switching strings for the left hand is that you need to be able to prepare one note ahead when you're playing. In other words, if I'm going from an E, first finger on the D string, to let's say a C sharp on the A, when I'm playing that E, I already want to have the C sharp down. So the left hand always needs to get to the note before the bow gets there. You want to avoid getting them there at the same time. There may be circumstances in which it really comes super close. However, that's more likely to happen in very advanced music. But a lot of the time, no matter the pattern, you should be able to get the notes ready. I will say that the difficulty comes when you have to switch from a higher pitch string to a lower pitch string by using higher fingers. So let's say going from the first finger on the A to the fourth finger on the D. You have to be careful because beginners frequently will have trouble putting the finger on the lower string without it touching the higher string. I'll try to show you what that looks like. So if I'm here and I press down the D, I have to be really careful so that the pinky does not touch the A string at all. If you haven't yet seen my 4 exercises for the right hand video to prepare you for a solid bow hold, do check it out because I think that that's a great preliminary thing to familiarize yourself with before you are going to get into these more advanced techniques. Please let me know if you have any questions about this, and I will do my best to answer in my future videos. I hope this was helpful. Happy mindful practicing, and I'll see you next time.